Everyone, we're going to get going here in just a minute, so why don't you have a seat, and we'll get this community meeting underway. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight here on this beautiful night here in Pittsfield. We're here tonight to talk about Kirvin Park and a very major restoration project that we'll be undertaking at the park beginning late this fall and into 2026. So my name is Jim McGrath. I work at City Hall. I'm the city's Park and Open Space Program Manager. And we've been working very closely with General Electric with assistance from the EPA and the Natural Resource Damage Trustees. So we've put together this team to evaluate Kirvin Park and its appropriateness for a major ecological restoration project. Now, this project is part of the larger river cleanup that General Electric is undertaking. And we'll talk about what that connection is. But so tonight we have Dennis Lowry. Dennis Lowry is a scientist with AECOM. That's the consulting firm that is working with General Electric to design this project. So Dennis is going to lead us through some slides. We're going to talk about what this project is, why we're doing it, and what the benefits are from this project. We want to also leave plenty of time for questions from you all because we understand that this is a very beloved park, and we want to make certain that you all are comfortable with what we're doing and that you have your questions answered. And that you understand that this park will remain open during the construction project, and we're going to make every attempt to make certain that there are no conflicts between our project and your use of the park. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis at this time. We're going to go through the slides as quickly as we can. We'll save your questions till the end, and that's how we're going to run the evening. So Dennis Lowry.
Thank you, Jim. And I would say if there's anything really pressing during the actual presentation, feel free to raise your hand. We've got a small group, and it might be best to answer some questions as we go through it. As Jim said, I am Dennis Lowry. I'm a wetland ecologist. I've been doing wetland ecological consulting in New England and the Northeast for many decades. I won't say how many, but I've been working specifically in the Housatonic River Valley probably for the last 30 years on different projects, and more specifically directly on the Housatonic River restoration aspects since 2008, so somewhere around 17 years or so. So it's been a real pleasure to work on this project. As Jim indicated, it's been a team approach. I have a number of colleagues from AECOM, the different types of wetland scientists. We've had wildlife biologists, soil scientists, hydrologists, engineers, working collaboratively on this, but people from GE, from Mass DEP, from the EPA, and from the city have all contributed to the development of this plan where we're at the present time. And it is still somewhat of a concept. It's moving beyond the concept at this stage, but we certainly want to have input from the public relative to any fine-tuning or any specific aspects of the plan. We want to take into account comments that you all might have, and see how we can incorporate those questions into the project. So let me start with the slideshow there. So first of all, as an overview, the first bullet tells you what this is all about. It's to enhance the natural resources of the Housatonic River watershed. And there have been a number of projects over the last 20 years or so that have done that. This is one that comes out of a 2000 agreement between all the parties that have been mentioned here already. And specifically, the project was lined up under the consent decree to restore at least almost 10 acres of floodplain forest and create or restore over 2 acres of wetlands. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between floodplain and wetland as we go through this slide. But the trustees worked for a number of years from about 2015 up to 2019 on reviewing a number of different sites throughout the Housatonic River watershed, many sites, and they developed a matrix systematically looking at the conditions on different sites and trying to decide which of the sites might be best to do this type of restoration project on. They did a ranking of a number of different sites, and one of the sites that came out very high from that was published, that was put forth in this June 2019 report by the trustees and by Mass DEP, was the Kirvin Park had the elements within it that would warrant further investigations for putting forth a restoration plan of this nature. And this is actually the map that came out of this 2019 report, which we worked off of. Kirvin Park, and I'll go in more detail on the various components of it, but on this particular slide, we're down in that lower portion after you come down from William Street and you walk out to these fields just north of Sackett Brook. The two key elements here are Sackett Brook, which is flowing to the west to the Housatonic River, and Ashley Brook, which flows north to the confluence of the Sackett Brook, and all of that moves off to the west. Like all of our brooks, they have floodplain. They have an area that's subject, in this case, to the 100-year flooding event. And so that has been defined on this plan by FEMA, and we've used some of that data moving forward, because obviously if it's a floodplain restoration project, you want to know what the limits of flooding is, how deep the flooding is, the various components of that flood regime to incorporate into your restoration plan. So Kirvin Park, it's shown the overall area. It's about 225 acres large. This is William Street up here. So when you enter Kirvin Park, you come in off of Williams, and most of you park your cars here. There's the dirt road or the gravel road that extends down through the recreational field area, the Frisbee areas up in here, and then you come down into where most people walk their dogs and play with their dogs. I've met a lot of good dogs doing this project, so I want to call out to them. And there's the recreational field right in here and an open meadow area that we'll be talking about. So the areas, the specific areas that are subject to this restoration program are shown in this brown color here. Collectively, it's about 17 acres in size, so it's a little larger than was set forth, and we'll talk about the reasons why it's a little bit larger as we've added on to the different components of the restoration. But as was pointed out in that 2019 report, and which is very obvious when you go out here and you cross over Sackett Brook, there's the footbridge right in through here that you may be familiar with, that brings you over into this wooded area south of Sackett Brook and east of Ashley Brook. And what's growing in here is a very unusual type of community, one of the most intensive areas of invasive plants that I've come across in decades of working. And we'll talk a little bit about what the components of that is, how it's developed, and how we might go about turning this from an area of dense invasive plant growth into an area of native floodplain habitat and plant species. Any questions about the limits of this area? So again, the area of the restoration plan, this brown area in here, if I outline it quickly, extends down here and then goes back up through here. And then this other little brown area here is an area of some mowed meadow it's mowed once or twice a year by the city, but we're going to be doing some supplementary plantings in that area to enhance that habitat. So one of the first things we did is track the history of the invasive plant growth out here. And the main plant that we're focused on is this common buckthorn. It's Rhamnus cathartica. It's native to Europe. It was introduced into the Northeast United States in the 1800s, and it has gone crazy since that time. We have our problems with it here in the Northeast. It's actually more of a problem in the upper Midwest and even down through the Mississippi River Valley, where it has gone rampant in a lot of floodplains, but more than floodplains, it loves post-agricultural fields. It comes in very strongly, and that's really what's happened here. If we go back to this slide again, as you come down through the recreational fields on the existing road, this road used to extend across Sackett Brook. In fact, there's an old culvert in the wetland right here that came out of Sackett Brook that used to allow the roadway to cross through here and out into this, what was back in the 1980s, early 1990s, an agricultural field. And since that time, it has gone fallow. The agriculture stopped. And what's happened since that time, as you see, the increase in prevalence of this wooded community, which when you cross Sackett Brook and go up that trail along Ashley Brook and you look off to your left or off to the east, you'll see this very unusual community. The buckthorn is this taller, Taller shrub to small tree is kind of right. It can be either a shrub or a tree. And the understory beneath it is also prone to invasive species, things such as the Morrow's honeysuckle and bittersweet and multiflora rose, and at the herb layer, a lot of garlic mustard and bishop's goutweed. So these species have taken over this floodplain community. They have a significant effect on the habitat functions, the biodiversity. We'll talk about how few species are in this community versus what should be in a floodplain plant community. And not only do they affect the habitat, but they affect really the soil conditions as well, the microbiology in the soils, the chemistry of the soils, whether the soils are prone to erosion. They even affect the earthworms that are in there. Mostly it's an invasive European earthworm that's associated with this type of a community as opposed to native earthworms. So the whole community changes as these species come in and kind of monopolize what's out there. And so our goal is to get rid of this community and turn it into a natural native floodplain plant community. So the components of the plan, we'll look at both sides here, but really, we talked about the components that were in that original agreement. And so we have our 10-acre floodplain restoration, which is this gray area here, which corresponds to that dominance of buckthorn, that entire community. We have a wetland creation, about a 3-acre area, 2.5 to 3 acres up in the northern end, closer to Sackett Brook that we'll talk about. We have this supplementary tree planting area in the floodplain of Sackett Brook on the north side of the brook. And down in the southern end here, we have kind of a new component to the plan, and that's a pollinator habitat, which has been increasingly considered to be important to add to the sustaining our plant growth and the diversity in our open meadows in particular, but contribute to bees and butterflies and other types of pollinators like that. So again, just to outline the components of the plan, we're back up here at William Street. We come in, we go through that gravel dirt road. There might be some staging right here. There's an open gravel lot there that might be useful for the contractor. We do need to get access across Sackett Brook. We're not using the existing footbridge that's there, so we'll be looking at a temporary timber mat crossing to get into this floodplain area. There will be, some activity coming in through this roadway. This is really the only way to get into this site, and so those are the different components shown in the larger Kirvin Park plan. Any questions about the area that we're working in, or good? So we've done a lot of work over the last 3 years, and to try and understand the conditions out here and what has kind of determined the extent of the conditions out there, and it's been like putting together a puzzle. One of the first things we did is a detailed wetland delineation. Now, again, the difference between a floodplain, which is subject to flooding during a 100-year storm event, and you can have a more frequent flood event, but a wetland is where the wetland has certain types of vegetation, certain types of soil, and a hydrology that's governed by within the root zone of the plants. So we've had soil scientists and biologists define the limits of what's actually a wetland out in here, and that's this green zone in through here. One of the things we learned early on is that beavers have been very active out here. This is the remnants of an old beaver dam that was extended across Sackett Brook. It actually caused the fields up here to flood a number of years ago, and the city took care of the damming that was causing that flooding. But one of the things the beavers did is, being the industrious beavers, is they tied their dam into the old roadway that came across Sackett Brook. So this is a filled roadway berm that's remnant from the old agricultural activity, and the beavers tie their dam into that filled roadway, and that allows them to flood this entire wetland. And at the same time, what it does is it stops the flooding or changes the hydrology in the downside of the dam. So this area of the wetland stopped getting the same hydrologic components that it did originally as it was dammed up and sent over to Sackett Brook. So this has affected, kind of the conditions of this wetland, and is a factor in how we go about determining what might be done for restoring that. This gives you a shot of this very nice, productive, herbaceous marsh community that's within the beaver impoundment area, and in stark contrast to what we saw for the with the buckthorn growth down in this portion of the site. So we've looked in detail at the wetlands. We've done detailed soil assessments. We've looked at groundwater levels. We actually put in monitoring wells so that we've got continuous graphing of the water table out through here over several years of time period. We've looked at rare species potential occurrence on the site and taken that into account. And we've looked at archaeological, cultural potential resources on the site as well to make sure that all of that is addressed in the restoration plan. Just a quick shot of the monitoring wells that we've had out there. These are tied into to data loggers so that they give you a continuous read, and we now have about 3 years of continuous groundwater readings. Some of these wells are actually, well, they're near to the wetland edge, so that we know if we want to create a new wetland in here, we want to know where the groundwater table is. We also want to know where the flood levels are during a 1 and 2 year flood event of Sackett Brook, so we can design this wetland area here consistent with both groundwater and surface water flooding. We've done a lot of work on what's out there for the plant community, and we've talked a lot about the invasive species, which is shown in this green area here. It's urban shrub cover, meaning all that buckthorn, the goutweed, and the garlic mustard, all of that, which is the predominant occurrence out throughout this entire area. But there's also things that are native out here that we want to make sure we incorporate into the restoration plan. For example, we've identified all the large diameter native trees that are out here, and there are some good ones. There's like a 40-inch cottonwood. So all of those beneficial native species that are out there, we know where they are. We want to incorporate them into the restoration plan. We're not going to go in and clear cut this. We're going to preserve the positive elements that are out in the floodplain and the wetland. There are some of the plant community areas, these brown areas here and the darker brown, are where we have more of a dominance of native species. So we don't want to just go and wipe those out. We want to incorporate those into the restoration plan. So going back to those nasty invasive plant species, we've done a lot of work in New England. I don't think I've ever seen a buckthorn plant community like this. Again, we see it up in the upper Midwest, but normally when you come across buckthorn, like in the floodplain of the Housatonic River, you'll see a few trees or shrubs here and there. But never have we seen it become so dominant in here that it has really taken over the entire plant community. So just for an example, I mean, there's 88 total species out in this community, which is a good amount of diversity, but 90% of those plants are taken up by 15 of these invasive species. So there's very little evenness in the plant community. It's dominated by these 6 invasive species, the common buckthorn being most prominent, the Morrow's honeysuckle growing in the understory beneath it, the oriental bittersweet. You may deal with it in your yard. It's almost impossible to beat back. It'll grow up 50 feet into the top of a tree and strangle the tree over time. And of course, these herbaceous plants, your garlic mustard is all over the place in the floodplains out here. So all of those need to be, basically taken care of to the extent possible in terms of getting them out of this community and turning this into a native plant community instead. Oops, I think I went back the wrong way. No, okay, so what do we do to restore this type of habitat? So we have the 10-acre floodplain area, which is, basically this area right in through here. We'll stay out of the wetland for now. And so what we want to do, first of all, we talked about preserving what's positive in there, what's native. We want to make sure that we retain what's native in the community. The other thing we talked a little bit about rare species. The wood turtle is a state-listed species that occurs in this area. About 5 or 6 years ago, we did a small wetland creation project over here for the city, and the wood turtles, actually we've seen them in there as recently as this year. So we know there are wood turtles out in this area, and I'll talk a little bit more about how the restoration plan is addressing wood turtles, both during construction, but then in the long term as well. So we need to go in and cut these woody invasive plants in particular, the buckthorn, the honeysuckle, the bittersweet, multiflora rose, and we'll be chipping those on site for removal from the site. So it'll be a cut off at the ground level. We will be applying a targeted herbicide treatment to those stumps almost immediately. In fact, there's a specific device called a buckthorn blaster that's been developed in the Northeast that has the herbicide in it. As soon as they cut it, they hit the stump, and it spreads the herbicide onto the stump, and the herbicide is systemic, meaning it goes down into the root system and kills the roots. And so that way we don't need to grub the site. We don't need to rip the roots out and cause all that soil disturbance. The plan is to do this cutting down to the ground level, hitting the herbicide with it, and then moving forward with a restored plant community. So after those trees are cut and the shrubs, the invasive species are cut and removed, we'll be seeding the site with a cover crop, and the experience in the upper Midwest has shown that if you come in with a good cover crop, herbaceous cover crop to initially, it has a lot of positive impact on reducing the recurrence of the growth of the buckthorn and the other invasive plants. So we would establish that herbaceous cover crop for a year. We'd have to do follow-up spot treatment on the regenerating buckthorn and honeysuckle, other invasive plants. And then after a year of that cover crop being established on the site and controlling the regrowth of the herbaceous species, we will come in with an extensive planting plan of trees and shrubs that we will be talking about as we go forward here.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Over here.
Hi.
Hi, I had a question.
Yep.
Before you move to the next slide. Where you're applying the targeted herbicide treatments,
Yep.
Is it safe for us to assume that that's not going to harm any critters and the birds?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Targeted herbicide.
Yes, no, well, there's a couple different herbicide approaches that we can take. Both of them are, EPA-approved herbicides, and the really important part is that it's focused just on the stump sprout, so that it's not like a foliar application. It's not being broadcast through the community. It goes right onto the stump. That's right where you cut the buckthorn, you hit that stump right on the spot with the herbicide. And actually the data shows you want to hit it within 2 hours of it being cut, because that's when most of the translocation occurs down into the root system,
That's
right?
when you're going to remove the material from it.
Well, we're removing the cut portion up above, but we're not removing the roots themselves. The roots are going to get killed by the herbicide.
And that's not going to, so even though it's targeted, critters, I know we're talking
Right.
about little
Yeah.
critters that if they go and eat around there, it's not going to hurt them.
No, it will not. Yeah.
Promise?
Yeah, I promise. Yeah. Yep. Hi. I'm sorry? The soil? Yeah, no, actually it has a very short-term residual resistance within the soil. Yeah, and it really doesn't get integrated with the soil. It stays within the plant structure itself. And that's the way the translocation and the systemic action of the herbicide works when you cut a woody species like that. Now, when we come back later and do the follow-up treatment, if we have like small plants kind of regenerating, there might be a need for doing some foliar application. Normally, that's done with what's called a wand. So it's, again, you're not necessarily spraying. They have these different devices that allow you to put that herbicide directly on the leaf that you want to hit and nothing else around it. So that's the approach. Any other questions? So in the wetland portion, we're talking about 2.5 acres or so up in this northern end here. We talked about how the beaver had changed the hydrology of this area. So what we want to do is come in and remove this filled portion, this old roadway bed that's in here, and basically open the grading up between the existing wetland, that nice marsh picture that I showed a few slides ago, so that the hydrology and the grades are consistent through this area rather than kind of impounded by the combination of this old roadway and the beaver dam. So we'll be dropping the grades up in through here, the well data and the flooding data from Sackett Brook indicates that this would be a more productive wetland if we bring it down and grade a foot or two. So we will be removing soil from this 2.5 acres or so of wetland, and removing that to the southern portion of the site, which we'll talk about. As within the floodplain, once we've removed that soil, we will have to bring in some new topsoil in this case to replace the topsoil that we've removed. And we will be seeding that again with a wetland seed mix. getting stabilization of the soil by the cover crop and the wetland seed mix. And then after a year, we'll continue to have to watch it for for buckthorn growth, apply some targeted application of the herbicide. And the important thing at that point is get it ready for a full planting program, which we'll talk about now. So we have a lot of plantings to come in out here, and I want to first of all give a depiction of what this floodplain might look like instead of that view of the buckthorn community that you saw. So first of all, by preserving the existing, those large 30 trees or so that are out there, we're not clear cutting this. So we'll have a community that looks like a scattered tree growth, and we will have the shrubs and the herbaceous community that's been established in the floodplain coming in very quickly. So we've selected trees in the floodplain area that are consistent with the hydrologic conditions in the floodplain. These are all native trees that are found in our floodplains: cottonwood, silver maple, pin oak, red maple, box elder, black willow. And I think this adds up to almost 5,000 trees that will be planted within this floodplain area. Similarly, we've selected shrubs that are found naturally. They're all native species found in our floodplains. And I think this adds up to about 7,000 shrubs that will be planted within that floodplain area. In addition, we've got a couple species of vines that will be planted, which get away from the bittersweet vine and turn it into river grape and Virginia creeper. And we'll also be doing the seeding, as we talked about before, the cover crop, but then also a wildlife seed mix that's consistent with the floodplain conditions. So in terms of the wetland plantings, kind of a similar approach. We've selected species that are a little bit wetter in places anyways, like the speckled alder. But really, in terms of the hydrology, those same species, the cottonwood, silver maple, red maple, black willow, all typical species we find in wetlands that are embedded in the floodplain communities of the rivers out here, rivers and streams. Same thing with the shrubs, and again, we have the vines that are being planted, and we also have 3 fern species that are being planted within the wetland. I think it's sensitive fern, cinnamon fern, and probably ostrich fern, I would imagine.
And all those ferns and the herbaceous grape, those are all native again?
Yes, oh yeah, we're only planting native species, yep. So down in the south area, we talked about this area. We will be taking the soil material that has to be excavated out of this wetland area and bringing it down to this portion of the site. We'll be mimicking the current grading that's it's kind of a rolling terrain that's in here. And we'll be establishing, this is what it looks like right now. It's kind of a mixture of invasive species. We've got more buckthorn, we've got a fair amount of multiflora rose. We have we've got more honeysuckle, and we do have some goldenrods, which are a pollinator species, but the goldenrod, like many invasive species, is considered allelopathic, meaning it changes the soil conditions, it changes the soil chemistry, and limits the ability of other plant species to come in, so it becomes very monotypic. And what we want to create here is a diverse assemblage of meadow species, a lot of the coneflowers, the rudbeckia, the echinacea or the purple coneflower, asters, milkweeds. So we'll be establishing this type of pollinator habitat, which will be, a nice visual effect for visitors back in this portion of the site as this trail comes down through here. But more importantly, it's going to be an important component for pollinator species. And you may have read a little bit about pollinators taking a real hit in the last 20 years or so. The bees, the butterflies, the moths, which are really critical for reproduction of plants, and they support food production and wildlife. There's been a drastic decline in the abundance of those species and in the prevalence of habitat that supports them. And there have been a number of efforts out in the Housatonic Valley from the Connecticut border on up through Pittsfield to create pollinator habitat. And really the idea is to have a network of pollinator habitats coming up through the valley that support each other, that work kind of in combination. And so we will be establishing that type of native wildflower plant community in this 2-acre pollinator habitat, which will be a really nice feature to add to the ecological diversity in the park. And the other part that we talked about is this supplemental tree planting area. I think we have about 800 trees, same species that were listed for the floodplain area. And the idea here is to really expand upon the riparian forested area along the edge of Sackett Brook in this specific location. So the wood turtle, which added a little additional complexity to the plan because the wood turtle is a state-listed species out in this area. And so we had to go to Mass Natural Heritage, and actually it was U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that suggested, well, since the wood turtle is there, do we have turtle nesting habitat out here anywhere along Sackett Brook? So we did some surveys for potential nesting habitat. The wood turtle, they have a very specific sand and gravel type of requirement for their nesting. And what we found along Sackett and Ashley Brook is potential habitat for nesting, but mostly it's a larger cobbled type material down lower along the river, and not necessarily, what these species would prefer for nesting. So we went to Mass Natural Heritage, and they've been agreeable to establish a couple of turtle nesting areas up in a little higher in the floodplain that would be basically consist of sand and gravel deposits that are not right down along the edge of the river, but a little bit higher. So we have one proposed here and another one down on the south side of the wetland creation area. And the intent is to obviously improve conditions for sustaining the wood turtle population out in this area. A couple of other aspects of the plan. One is this existing footbridge that crosses Sackett Brook is in, I guess, a little bit of disrepair, and it's proposed to refurbish that trail bridge over Sackett Brook, make sure that it's stable and more suitable for the traffic that likes to. A lot of bikes like to go over that and follow this trail down up into Washington Mountain area. As you come across that bridge, there's a low-lying area that's always muddy, always a mess to get through. Dogs walk through it and usually come out of it all muddy. The bikes get muddy through there. So we're going to be raising the grade of that just slightly so that it will no longer be a kind of a muddy pit.
Excellent.
And so I'm glad you like that. That's so that'll be worked in with the wetland grading as well, so that will be an improvement in that portion of the site. The dogs will still find the mud, I guarantee it. Yeah.
But we might not slip on it.
Right. So one of the things that's committed to in the incorporation of this plan or the implementation of this plan is doing exactly what we're doing here tonight, and that's reaching out to the community, making sure everybody's aware of what's proposed, getting input from the community, making sure that any issues and concerns you might have are being addressed. So this is not the end of that outreach process. There'll be information on a website, and thanks to Mass DEP, and Michelle is here. There is now a website available, and we'll give you a link to that as we go through it, or you could just Google Mass DEP Kirvin Park restoration, and that will take you to that website. So we're going to continue with updates on that website. We'll be preparing some fact sheets about some of the technological aspects of this. There'll be signs that'll be continued to post just to keep people aware of the progress that's being made as in this type of format to make it kind of digestible in a easily consumed fashion. One of the most important things that I'm sure you're all concerned about is, will your uses be affected at the park during project implementation? And the easy answer is no. We plan to have all recreational fields. They'll all remain open and unaffected. At the most, there'll be occasional traffic coming through here, to remove the chipped material, for example, to get access in here with the equipment to do the work. The dog walking and playing will remain open. There might be some limitation, obviously, if there's staging and if there's traffic down through here, but the intent here is not to affect any of those existing recreational activities. The trail that goes south down along this portion of the site, we expect to have like construction fencing put up along the edge of it so that you can still use the trail, but it will be protected from those work activities. Oops. Sorry about that. There we go. So the schedule in terms of going forward from tonight, first of all, I'll point out that this is the last formal report that was done back in September 2024. We've been working on updates to this plan since that time. Some of the access issues, how we're crossing Sackett Brook, how we're using that south staging area for the pollinator habitat. Those have all been added since this plan was produced. So we will be following up with a new version of this plan over the next month or two towards mid-July. And there will be a 30-day public comment period after that point for all of you to put in any formal comments. We'll be looking at contractor selection right after that. And what normally happens once you get a contractor involved is they have some of their own ideas that you might want to incorporate into the plan. So we're anticipating a revised final plan that would be based upon that contractor input somewhere in mid-fall or so, October or so. And one of the things that's affecting the schedule here is Mass Natural Heritage has indicated they would like us not to have active construction during the wood turtle active season when it's in the floodplains. Normally by late November, or normally by November 1st, the wood turtles have moved into the brooks, and that's where they hibernate. So they aren't using the floodplain at that point. We have an alternate provision that could allow us to start work earlier than November, and that would be a wood turtle management plan where we sweep the site for wood turtles. We get them out of the active construction zone. We use exclusion fences, basically silt fences, to keep the wood turtle out of the active area. So there is some possibility that we could move the schedule up a bit, but for the most part, we're looking at construction starting in November and extending, November, December, doing most of the clearing work, and most of the significant labor would be done during that time period. And that would then lead us to landscaping and planting and maintenance following next spring, May of 2026, and continuing into May of 2027. If you recall, we had the provision for a cover crop to be planted in place for about a year as we do the updating of the invasive plant control. Sorry about that. And then I'm looking forward down here where we have actually incorporated into the plan a 5-year post-construction monitoring and maintenance schedule where we'll be looking at the site in detail over that 5-year period and following up with any maintenance that's required during that time period. So we talked about the website. This is the website. This is a QR code that if anybody's inclined, they can hold up your phone to, and that'll take you right to that website. And that will be subject to ongoing updates as we move forward through the summer into the fall. And that's pretty much the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Dennis. If you do put together a crew to sweep the site for those turtles, I want to be on that.
There you go. Yeah, okay.
So the whole purpose of the meeting here tonight was to convey information and then hear from you. So now's your opportunity to ask some questions. We have folks from the Conservation Commission in the room. I represent the Park and Recreation Department, even though this is a conservation property. It is the recreation attributes of Kirvin Park are managed by the Park Department. We have folks from the DEP. We have folks from EPA that are here that are part of the team. So there's a lot of brain power in the room that can answer your questions. And all that I would ask tonight is that if you do have a question, you raise your hand, and I'm going to bring the microphone to you so that we can all hear you, and we'll go like that. So if anyone has questions, raise your hand, and I'll be happy to get those answered. We'll start in the back out here.
Hi, so all of this work is on the south side of Sackett Brook, but recently, especially with the rains we had this weekend, the bank on the north side is very seriously eroded, and one of the smaller trees has actually been uprooted. So I'm wondering if anything is going to be done, or if how this project might impact that, because right now, that tree just fell right over. And we're concerned that some of the other trees, the larger ones, if they come down and there's somebody or something under them, could be very serious.
Yeah, we had not anticipated doing any work along the bank of Sackett Brook. We have the temporary crossing where we do need to put some timber mats on the bank, and we may need to do a little bit of clearing for that. But beyond that, that type of activity, is kind of a natural component of riverine dynamics as it erodes away the bank, and that creates habitat. I would imagine the city, other than clearing that for access and so forth.
That's certainly something that we'll go have a look at. If those trees are in a precarious position, I know there's a lot of folks that gather at the end. We've been tracking those trees. We've felt confident that they were holding fast, but if conditions have changed because of flows and because of instability of the bank, we'll have a look at that. So we'll prioritize that with the conservation agent. We'll head out there and have a look at that. We'll bring park maintenance with us, and we'll see what the appropriate action is out there. Certainly, we want to make certain that it's a safe site, and if there's something we need to do in that respect, I trust we'll be able to address that. Other questions? We'll stick back here for a moment, and then we'll go in the front.
Dennis, I know you probably said this in the beginning, so I apologize for making you repeat yourself, but the full name of the trustees?
Michelle, I'll let you give the full name since Michelle is here as a representative.
The GE Housatonic Natural Resource Damages Trustee Council, which consists of Mass DEP, representing the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as the state of Connecticut, as well as NOAA. However, this is the Massachusetts Sub-Council, so for here it's really pertaining to
Individuals from all of those organizations make up the trustees.
correct.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Right here.
How could the community help out with this project? Like, is there any, major things that we could do to help out?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and we could look for opportunities. Yeah. So the question was, how can members of the community help out with the restoration process? Yeah, great suggestion.
That's a good question. I think as we get more into the details of how this project will be actually put together, there may be opportunities that are identified for volunteer involvement. That may not be sort of the physical labor end of things, but maybe that's getting the word out to the neighbors. Maybe that's posting signs within the park relative to when construction is going to start. So my response to you on that is, if you're interested in this project and if you're interested in staying abreast of the project and potentially getting involved, I'd like you to reach out to me. Again, my name is Jim McGrath. I'm at City Hall. I'm very accessible, and if you really have a desire to be involved, we will find a way to plug you in some way, shape, or form. So just reach out.
Yeah,
Other questions?
It's a great learning opportunity as well as something that could help the project. So it's a great idea.
Beavers periodically dam up Sackett Brook
Sure do.
and flood it a lot.
Yep.
Is that going to be desirable for the restoration process? Like, is those natural cycles?
Right.
I mean, they're eventually removed, I guess, and we used to have trapping to kind of keep them in check. But is that cycle good for the program you're doing?
Right. Well, the intent of this project is to create kind of self-sustaining floodplain wetland community. So to the extent that beavers are part of that, it's a part that's going to be naturally incorporated into it. There's really nothing that's proposed here that would be in conflict with beaver activity. Beavers can certainly affect it. We've been dealing with it in Uncommon Brook, for example, for years as well. So they certainly have an effect. Whether it's a really negative adverse effect would depend upon what the beavers actually do. Sometimes that major beaver dam that they installed back pushing 10 years ago or so now that it was first put in, is still out there in various forms, but it's also been in, kind of disappearing over the time as well. So it doesn't have the same effect now. But the intent is, we can't totally control the beavers for sure. Yeah.
And my other question was about the wood turtle habitat you're going to create.
Yep.
Would there be issues with unleashed dogs getting in there, and can you put signage up to keep the dogs out of that?
Yeah, the wood turtles are there now. They've been there, for at least 10 years, probably more than that. We're actually tracking wood turtles in the Housatonic River right now. We have transmitters on them. And, we know that they come from the Housatonic River and travel all the way up Sackett Brook. In fact, we found in 1 week, one of the wood turtles had traveled 3,000 feet up Sackett Brook from the Housatonic River. So they're moving around all through the area. One of the ways we track wood turtles is we have a trained dog that finds them. And, the wood turtle, they're very resilient. It's very difficult for a dog to hurt it. They just close up and they hunker down. The dog, doesn't really cause too much adverse impact to the wood turtle. So I wouldn't really worry about that. Okay. What about the nests? Well, yeah, I guess it's possible that they could get into a nesting area like that for a dog to do that. So I guess, every dog I've seen out there has been under pretty good control by their owners. So I wouldn't anticipate that to be a big problem, but it might be something where signage is put up to make people aware of that. And if they see them off digging in the sand, in July, they say, hey, get out of there. So it's a good suggestion, yeah.
Other questions?
I noticed how straight Sackett Brook looked. Was that man-made, or was it just a coincidence? Like, it looked very straight and almost a 90-degree angle.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Well, I don't have the map up here right now, but there's no evidence that Sackett Brook was channelized. It's possible that the agricultural activity back 100 years ago, came in, and that was not an uncommon occurrence for a farmer to straighten a brook. Make the land more usable for their agricultural activity. So it's possible that it was straightened, 100 years ago or more. But at this point, it has some sinuosity to it, and it's, the banks are naturalized, as evidenced by the trees that are, that come down periodically. Those are all natural events along the course of a river like this.
And did that previous agricultural plan affect how many invasive species there were?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence that agricultural activities, when they disappear, encourage invasive plants. The soil has been disturbed at that point. It's just ripe for colonization by invasive plants. And what they do is they change the site to their own benefit. The invasive plants, they have this allelopathic effect where they can actually affect the chemistry of the soil. They affect, the microbiology of the soil. They actually have a leaf phenology. Basically, their leaves come out earlier, they stay on later, so that they diminish the potential of native species to colonize. They're invasive for a reason. They develop these capabilities of monopolizing the site, and they do tend to occur on post-agricultural lands with a great prevalence.
Thank you.
Great questions, thanks for that. Right here?
How's the planting planned? Is randomized, or do we have certain zones for each shrub or tree?
I'm sorry, I know it's about the planting plan. I didn't catch the detail.
But is it on zones? Is it made on zones, divided? Or is it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, good question. So the question was, are we planting randomly or in zones, which is a great question. And I would say that we have not worked that level of detail out yet. We have the density of the plants, we have the species, we have the, the relative abundance of the different species. Whether or not we come up with a more detailed plan and plant them, in a certain pattern actually has not been determined yet. It's a very good question. We have many times where we do plant in zones, and I would say this plan has not been developed to that level of detail yet.
Okay. And would you like put them like in mind having like given the opportunity to like to high school students to work on the project, like have an actual, I don't know, like for example we're on ecology right now, like
right.
we're on biology, we're seeing ecology, right?
Yeah.
And I think it would be a great opportunity for students to actually see like how it works personally. So I think it would be great like for having like an actual bind with the high schools on Pittsfield
Yeah.
or Berkshires
Right.
to work on the project.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's great that you guys are here. I mean, it's really encouraging to see that type of interest and involvement. And I would say, all of us would look for every opportunity we can to have you stay involved in the project in various different ways. And, that's incumbent upon us to find the right opportunities there for you. I think it's.
Maybe we can work with GE to find some appropriate time to have a field visit with students and the professor to check in on the project to see what's happening and make certain that it's a safe situation. There's also a whole host of other restoration projects currently happening in the city that between my office and the conservation office, we'd be happy to share with you. We have a $20 million dam removal project on Wacona Street. We're working on a very significant park improvement project at Pontusic Lake. So there are a whole host and there's a number of other projects that we've completed in the past, which are very successful and provide lots of ecological benefit to our city. So all we need to do is sort of connect you guys with me and the conservation agent, and we can find a time to introduce you to the work that we've been doing and potentially figure out ways to make certain that you have a sort of an up close and personal view of what's happening at Kirvin Park. And we really appreciate that you have an interest in this. We appreciate that you're here tonight. And this is really important for us, and we're happy to share what we've done over the years. So thanks for being here. Yeah.
So if I could add on to that. So as natural resource trustees, what we do is we put back what was lost due to contamination or some sort of environmental injury. And we do that by restoring these sites on behalf of the public. So we're in there and we're doing this restoration. Sometimes, it might not be the best for people to be in the middle of all the machinery and the pesticides and things like that. But really, some of our biggest challenges that we face is outreach. So, we've, as someone who used to be a student for a very long time, I always wanted to get my hands dirty. But really the hardest thing that we face as natural resource trustees is getting the word out to the public. So if you're concerned about your turtles or your pollinators, or, you want to be mindful of that beaver activity, then definitely think of, wrap your mind around projects that could also become the best outreach for your communities, to inform them to keep those dogs out of those nesting turtle beds and things like that. So that's something to consider also. But definitely I would recommend, getting out to any of the sites that are, that we've put out there with this Housatonic settlement money. And it's amazing the work that people are able to do, but very, very few people outside of the initial communities know what's going on. So just getting the word out would be a really great help to all of us.
Thank you for that. Jane?
I have a bunch of questions, so feel free to stop me if somebody else has a question. You talk about the pollinator habitat. How are you going to maintain that as pollinator habitat?
So the intent of most pollinator habitats, as you probably know, is to establish a series of wildflower plants that are basically perennial species that don't require a lot of maintenance. I know that's not necessarily that easy to do, and many times they're incorporated into, whether it's landscapes that are maintained. Our intent here is that this would not need constant maintenance, that it would be established as a wildflower meadow. And if you go along the Housatonic River and you see, these open meadows, I mean, there's lots of the rudbeckia or the coneflower communities that are very resilient, very resistant to change. And they're long-lived plant communities. So that's the intent. But I certainly take the nature of your question as being, is that realistic or not? And so some of that stuff, I would say we don't necessarily know.
Seems to me you're going to get shrubs coming in and
Yep.
not have that habitat.
Right.
Other point is trees are fantastic for pollinators.
True.
I would really appreciate it if you'd consider adding serviceberry and witch hazel that are early and late blooming for pollinators, and a lot more oak, which is really great for caterpillars.
Yep.
So
Yeah, those are two great species. So you're saying add oak species as well?
I would add more oak, not
Okay.
just pin, to
Interesting.
provide more good larval pollinator habitat.
Yep. Yeah, we were planning on having some scattered shrubs and a few trees out in this 2-acre area as well, but not to the detriment of the meadow, the open meadow community.
For your cutting and herbiciding, if you're doing that November to January, is that really a time that the buckthorn is going to be drawing down stuff into its roots?
Right. Yeah, it's a bit of a conflict, and then we're working with Heritage. We're hopeful that they're going to let us, get the cutting. Really, the anticipation is if we can do the cutting in November, that's still within the time period where the translocation, would allow the systemic activity of the herbicide to work. If we get much later than that, then it can be more of a problem. But there are other options, between the glyphosate and triclopyr can actually go a little bit later into the year as well. So it's definitely something we have an eye on in terms of the timing. Yep. It's a good point.
I'm not convinced the herbicides are so benign to the soil, but that's another issue. By raising the grade of the trail, are you sure that's not going to disrupt the hydrology to the brook?
Yeah, the intent is, if you look at where the grading was, we have to bring it down a little bit deeper on the east side of that trail. And so what we're trying to do is actually retain that flow of water coming across. So there's only about a foot of grade there. We probably will want to have a couple of small plastic culverts go through that trail area so that they will allow the drainage to pass through. But it's another good point and something that we're aware of. Yep.
I think my last question is, well, first of all, thank you very much for a 5-year post-construction maintenance plan. But is there a provision for extending that if you really don't have the invasives fully controlled?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there are performance standards that are tied into this project that are part of the consent decree and the statement of work that was generated as part of the consent decree. And those performance standards do address the prevalence of invasive plants, and the monitoring of that and the control of that is based upon achieving those performance standards.
Lots of good questions here tonight. Anyone have the next one? Over here, student.
So you said how their invasive species have been here for like 200 years now. Is it possible that any organisms have been relying on that through the long time that they've been here?
I'm sorry, is it possible that that things are relying upon them?
Yeah.
Well, if you go out into that buckthorn community, and I'd encourage you guys to take a walk out there, one of the things you'll notice is how deathly still it is. There's you'll see a robin here or there going after the invasive earthworms, but there's very little use of that type of plant community. So yes, I would say there are species that adapt to it. I'm sure you all know about Phragmites, that tall reed that grows everywhere. And, there is evidence that over time, other species are getting adapted to making use of Phragmites because it is so prevalent. But by and large, it still is a negative aspect in terms of overall habitat diversity and usefulness. And I guarantee there will still be enough buckthorn out there when we're done that'll address any species that really want to use it. I mean, it does produce drupes or fruit. A lot of wildlife does eat the fruit. There's evidence that it's not good that those fruits create basically dietary issues with some of the birds. So that whether or not they've made use of it and whether or not that's a positive use is open to question. But overall, it would be much better to have native species out there than the invasive species.
Thank you.
Good question.
Good. Anyone else? Anyone? Well, again, I'd just like to thank you all for coming here tonight. Be mindful of the QR code, and there is that'll take you right to the website for the project. That's the site where current information will be uploaded periodically. So out of City Hall, we're also going to make certain that we've got this information accessible. So cityofpittsfield.org is the city's website. We will feature this on that site. And again, if you have questions at all, you can always find me at City Hall. If I can't answer your questions about the project, we will find the right people to answer your questions. So again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I thank you for your interest in the project, and hope to see you again at another community meeting. So again, thanks for coming out tonight.